Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edge of extinction. We'll share species research information and conservation proposals. And then we'll spend a chunk of the show opening and holding a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a kind of meditative sound bath, a soundscape of gentleness, quietude, reflection, and perhaps mourning. There is a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century. And so, perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the jellyfish tree. The jellyfish tree is a critically endangered tropical tree native to the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean, roughly 900 miles east of the African continent. The jellyfish tree is a small tree, typically reaching heights of roughly 40 feet. Its trunk is slender, with dark fissured bark. Branches are numerous and spreading, resulting in a dense, rounded crown of foliage. Its vibrant green leaves that grow up to 3 inches in length are glossy and leathery in texture, with wavy, slightly scalloped edges. The jellyfish tree is andromonoecious, meaning male and bisexual flowers present on the same individual. These small white blossoms measure about ½ inch in diameter, and they grow in downward hanging clusters and feature many long, thin stamen. Stamen are the pollen-producing male reproductive organ, so the upside-down cupped flowers have numerous stamen that radiate down and outward, which do, in fact, resemble the tentacles of a jellyfish. The jellyfish tree flowers are primarily pollinated by the wind. Though insects like flies and small bees may also play a role, the tree's copious pollen production seems adapted for wind pollination, but the presence of some nectar in the flowers suggests an adaptation to attract insect pollinators. The jellyfish tree has a relatively long reproductive cycle. Flowering and pollen release typically occurs in the late dry season, so this is September, October, November. And then after successful pollination, fruit development is gradual, with mature fruit appearing between 6 and 9 months later, so that's like late in the following spring, early summer. The small, round, roughly 1-inch fruits begin as green and then gradually turn reddish-brown. When the fruit dries, its outer layer dehisces, which means that it splits open. So it splits open at the top into, you can kind of imagine like an umbrella shape or a jellyfish-ish shape. And so the fruit opens, and inside the seeds are held within a network of fibers. The structure aids in wind dispersal. Like imagine how an umbrella catches like a big gust. The seeds themselves have papery wings, and when blown from the open fruit, disperse widely. This dispersal process can take days or even weeks depending on wind conditions and the distance that the seeds travel. In the wild, jellyfish tree seeds have very low germination rates. Scientists suspect they need very specific conditions, possibly involving high humidity or particular soil microorganisms, to successfully germinate. The germination process is basically the awakening of a dormant seed into a new plant. And so for that process to begin, certain environmental conditions need to be met. These conditions vary from plant species to species, but a quick overview, like in general, we're looking for the presence of water, optimal temperature, presence of oxygen, presence or absence of light, and particular soil conditions like depth, soil acidity, or nutrient content. In the case of the jellyfish tree, scientists are uncertain what specific conditions are critical to triggering germination, though, as mentioned, they suspect humidity likely plays a role. Once initiated, germination begins with imbibition. Imbibition is where the seed soaks up water. This swells the seed, weakens the seed coat, and activates internal enzymes. Those enzymes break down stored food reserves within the seed, transforming the food reserves into usable energy for the rapidly growing cells. And so the internal pressure from these growing cells causes the now weakened seed coat to rupture. The radicle pushes through this opening, emerging into the soil. Radicle is the name given to the first part of a seedling to emerge from the seed. So this is like the first embryonic root. No matter from which direction the radicle emerges, it will grow downward. This adaptation is called geotropism. So that's just like plant growth in response to gravity. This is so amazing. So a quick simplified explanation of this. Within the cells of the radicle are starch-filled statoliths and the hormone auxin, which inhibits cell growth. And so the stratoliths are heavy, they're starch-filled, and so due to gravity, they sink to the bottom, which displaces the auxin. The auxin accumulates on the upper side, prohibiting growth, and so as the root cells grow and divide, they do so downwardly, like away from the auxin. This downward growth is critical in ensuring access to water and soil nutrients necessary for survival, and it also anchors the young seedling in the ground. With the first roots established, the stem begins to grow upwards, emerging from the soil. The first leaves soon follow, which this initiates food production, photosynthesis. That food powers further growth and gradual maturation. After a few years, it reaches the sapling stage. This is a phase marked by strengthening of the roots, trunk, and branches. And eventually, with time and, of course, like the right conditions, the sapling grows into a mature jellyfish tree, ready to produce flowers and then the seeds that will continue the reproductive cycle. This entire process from seed dispersal to a mature tree capable of reproduction can take decades. In the dream, I am, as ever, a disappointing student. In the dream, when I study in the shade of the deep green teachers, the light eaters, the breath workers, my attention wanes. At first, I am cherishing the slow language of wind-carrying seed and feeling inspired to opening to our Earth's forces, inviting them to affect my path. And then I'm thinking about lunchtime. In the dream, at first, I marvel and imagine modeling a striving downward growth, a rooting, a holding firm in place. And then I'm wondering about who might want to kiss me. And though I repeatedly fail in my lessons, worrying about money, cranky when the train is stalled, my teachers persevere, remain encouraging with their foliage shimmering. And so I will once again commit to my studies and promise to be a better listener in my days and in the dream. Based on genetic studies, scientists estimate that the jellyfish tree diverged from its closest relative during the late Cretaceous period, so that's like roughly 60 million years ago. But the jellyfish tree has leathery, waxy leaves. This is an adaptation to reduce water transpiration, so suggesting it is drought tolerant. Which is curious because it lives on a very wet island. And so scientists hypothesize these adaptations evolved when the Seychelles Islands were still part of the mainland of the ancient supercontinent Gondwana, which would make the jellyfish tree over 150 million years old as a species. Let's follow a quick tangent into prehistoric plate tectonics. So this is like a simplified timeline of how the Seychelles Islands formed. Around 170 million years ago, Gondwana, the giant supercontinent, which encompassed modern-day South America, Africa, India, Antarctica, and Australia, began to split apart. And so the Indian subcontinent drifted away from Africa, and a fragment of continental crust broke off from it. this fragment eventually becomes the Seychelles microcontinent. The Seychelles microcontinent, including the granite that forms the island's bedrock, continued to drift northward with the Indian subcontinent. But then, approximately 65 million years ago, the Seychelles microcontinent separated from India as the Indian plate continued to move northward. The Seychelles remained, now isolated in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And so then, over tens of millions of years, the granite bedrock of the Seychelles was eroded and shaped by weathering and wave action, leading to the formation of the diverse landscapes, beaches, and unique granite rock formations seen on the island today. And these granite rock formations are the Jellyfish Tree's contemporary home. The Jellyfish Tree is solely found in a roughly 25 square mile area on Mahe Island in the Seychelles in the Western Indian Ocean, all populations growing less than 2 miles from the coastline. This area is called the Seychelles Granitic Islands ecoregion. It's characterized by lush tropical forests, tall granite peaks, and expansive beaches. The climate is tropical, with warm temperatures year-round. Summer highs typically reach the mid-90s, while winter lows rarely dip below 75 degrees. Annual rainfall is abundant, averaging 110 inches of precipitation, with the wettest months occurring from December to February. The jellyfish tree has adapted to a very specific niche within this ecoregion. It clings to crevices and cracks on exposed granite slopes and inselbergs. Inselbergs are like isolated hills, ridges, or small mountains that rise abruptly from otherwise flat plains. And so like a single extrusion popping out from a flat landscape. These slopes are characterized by shallow soils, intense sunlight, and occasional strong winds. The jellyfish tree shares this habitat with flying fox, pitcher plant, stilt palm, tiger chameleon, magpie robin, bamboo, scops owl, palm frog, kestrel, blue pigeon, brush-footed butterfly, tree fern, vanilla orchid, and many, many more. Soon after the arrival of the first settlers on Mahe in the 1700s, the forests of the island were exploited for timber and cleared for agriculture and plantations. And so by the late 1800s, the viable habitat for native plants was greatly reduced, with few patches of native forests remaining. Additionally, the anthropogenic, which that means human-caused, the anthropogenic introduction of alien species has impacted native forests over the last 150 years. So competition for resources like sunlight and soil nutrient has restricted native species to less hospitable environments, like the granite outcrops where we find the jellyfish tree today. In the early 20th century, the species was thought to be extinct in the wild until a stand of native trees were quote-unquote rediscovered in the 1970s. Today, habitat loss and invasive species continue to threaten the jellyfish tree. This is like deforestation for agriculture and development, and these non-native plants that outcompete the jellyfish tree for essential resources, hindering its growth and its ability to reproduce. Additionally, human-induced climate change with rising temperatures, increasing wildfires, altered weather patterns, and potential sea level rise pose further threat. Jellyfish tree propagation programs are ongoing at the Kew Royal Botanical Gardens, the Biodiversity Centre Mahe, and the Royal Botanic Garden of Edinburgh. Three of the known native populations of the jellyfish tree are within the Morne Seychelles National Park, but the tree itself is not legally protected. The jellyfish tree was added to the IUCN Red List of critically endangered species in 1998, and their population is currently in decline. Our most recent counts estimate that less than 90 jellyfish tree remain in the wild. Information for today's show about the jellyfish tree was compiled from the Journal of Molecular Ecology, Volume 20, Issue 18, New Phytologist, Volume 171, Issue 3, the International Journal of Plant Sciences, Volume 175, Number 7, Eileen Fingers, Doctoral Dissertation, Ecology and Genetic Processes Underlying Allele Effects Among Tree Populations in the Context of Divergent Population Histories, and from the IUCN and Wikipedia. So in a moment, I would like to perform some music in hopes of opening a space to be in contemplation of the other lives with whom we share our earth. But first, I want to clarify what feels to me like a somewhat nuanced idea. I want to state specifically that this music is not like for the jellyfish tree. I don't want to extract meaning from or put meaning upon the jellyfish tree. Instead, I want this music to hold space for just my very human awe, an opportunity to consider my own relationship to other life on our planet, in particular as some of that life nears extinction. So I will make and sit in space of sound, awe, and contemplation. And I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the jellyfish tree. I will carry its human name in my record. I am grateful to have shared time on our small bright planet with this being, and I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. And so, in the name of the jellyfish tree, I pledge to reduce my consumption, my carbon footprint, and curb my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of plant or animal kin or their habitat by corporations and governments. I pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bad at Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin. Goodbye.